Watership Down is the film that scarred a generation, a movie marketed as a sweet animal tale. But what kids got was a blood-drenched attacks, betrayal, and bunny genocide. Parents thought they were buying Bambi. What they got was Apocalypse Now, with fur. We're diving into 20 insane truths about the most traumatizing animated film ever made. Number 1. The story almost never happened. Here's where it all started. Watership Down didn't start off in a studio or a publisher's office. It began in the backseat of a car. Author Richard Adams was casually driving his daughters one day, making up a bunny adventure to keep them entertained. They fell in love with the cooked-up story and begged him to write it down. Adams did, but publishers wanted nothing to do with it. Rejected over and over, the story nearly died, until a small company, Rex Collings, finally took a chance. Originally called Hazel and Fiver, the book went on to become a global hit, from bedtime story to forbidden classic. Number 2. The movie launched Jake Ebert's career. After the book exploded, Watership Down caught the eye of producer Martin Rosen, who bought the film rights. He wasn't some Hollywood giant, just a guy who saw potential in a dark rabbit epic. But to actually make it happen, he needed money. Enter Jake Eberts, a Canadian banker who took a massive gamble financing the film. That decision changed his life. Eberts went from crunching numbers to becoming one of cinema's great producers, later backing Chariots of Fire, Gandhi, and Dances with Wolves. Think about that. Without a traumatizing bunny movie, some of the most important Oscar-winning films of the 20th century might not even exist. Watership Down didn't just shock kids, it jump-started a legendary Hollywood career. Number 3. The director who vanished, but left a nightmare behind. At first, Watership Down had serious Disney DNA. Animator John Hubley, who worked on Bambi and Snow White, was brought on as the original director. But things went south fast. Hubley clashed with producer Martin Rosen over creative control, and before the movie was even halfway started, he walked away. Most of his work vanished with him, except one thing. The film's haunting prologue, that surreal, grim myth about Ella, the Black Rabbit, and Death's shadow over the Warren, is Hubley's. That's his fingerprint, still opening the film today. After Hubley left, Rosen, who had zero directing experience, stepped up and finished the movie himself, which means this cult classic begins with the ghost of Disney past before diving into Rosen's brutal rabbit apocalypse. And if the violence didn't convince you this wasn't just some kiddie cartoon, the voices definitely did, because the next fact reveals Watership Down didn't just cast rabbits, it cast legends. Number 4. The cartoon had Oscar-level voice casts. For a movie about rabbits, Watership Down didn't mess around with its voices. The cast list reads like a who's who of British acting legends. Hazel, the steady leader, was voiced by none other than John Hurt.
Like clearing out of the Warren altogether.
Yes, the same man who had an alien burst out of his chest just a year later in Alien. His nervous brother Fiver, that was Richard Briers, one of Britain's most beloved stage actors.
I don't know. Something oppressive.
The seagull Kahar came to life thanks to Zero Mostel, the wild comic genius of the producers. Even supporting roles had heavyweights. Ralph Richardson as the stern Chief Rabbit, Denholm Elliott as the unsettling Cowslip, and Roy Kinnear as timid Pipkin. These weren't just voices. They gave the rabbits gravitas, turning what could have been a kid's cartoon into a haunting epic packed with Oscar-level talent. Number 5. The rabbits were never meant to look real. When you first watch Watership Down, you notice something uncanny. The rabbits don't look like textbook wildlife sketches. Instead, their faces move with distinctly human-like expressions. Wide eyes, grimaces, even subtle smiles. This was a deliberate choice by the animators. By giving the rabbits just enough human emotion, the audience could instantly relate to them. But that also meant every moment of pain, fear, or terror landed 10 times harder. Their suffering wasn't distant, like watching animals on a nature documentary. It felt personal and disturbing. The technique blurred the line between a fable and a horror story, making the violence unforgettable. That's why so many viewers, especially kids, found the film traumatizing, because when the rabbit screamed, it didn't feel like hearing an animal. It felt like us. Number 6. The rabbits refused to sing. In the 1970s, almost every animated film was a musical. The Jungle Book, Aristocats, Robin Hood, songs were expected. But Watership Down broke that rule. The rabbits didn't burst into cheerful tunes. The story was too dark for that. Originally, composer Malcolm Williamson was hired, but he fell behind schedule. Angela Morley, one of the first openly transgender women in film scoring, stepped in to finish the soundtrack. And then came the one exception, Bright Eyes, performed by Art Garfunkel. This ballad, written by Mike Batt, was so powerful it became a global hit, climbing to number 1 on the UK charts. The contrast was chilling. No happy chorus, just one heartbreaking song that defined the movie's legacy. Bright Eyes wasn't just a song, it was a wound set to music, and it left audiences haunted long after the credits rolled. But here's the strange part. For all its cultural impact, this movie didn't really belong to anyone. Which brings us to the next fact. Number 7. Watership Down wasn't owned by anyone. For decades, Watership Down was a movie trapped in limbo. After its 1978 release, the rights didn't stay in one place. They bounced like a hot potato from Universal to Warner Brothers, and through a mess of legal wrangling. That meant the film never got the steady home releases or restorations it deserved. Fans often had to rely on poor quality VHS tapes or scattered DVD versions, while other animated classics were preserved in crystal clarity. It wasn't until 2015, nearly 40 years later, that the Criterion Collection finally stepped in. Their restoration gave the film the respect it had long been denied, presenting the story in high definition with proper context. Until then, this classic about survival was itself struggling to survive in the world of cinema. Number 8. From kids' TV to Netflix nightmares, Watership Down didn't stop with the movie. In 1999, a children's TV series tried to soften the trauma. Gone were the shredded throats and rivers of blood, replaced with friendlier storytelling and a colorful voice cast that included Stephen Fry, Rick Mayall, and even John Hurt returning, though this time as a completely different rabbit. But the rabbits weren't done haunting screens. In 2016, Netflix resurrected the tale with a darker 3D animated miniseries. Netflix comes for all of us in the end, and my day will come too. How an AI voice of a weird movie channel created a cult YouTube following of his own, I can dream. The Netflix version of Watership Down starred James McAvoy, Ben Kingsley, and Olivia Colman. And while the visuals divided fans, the tone went right back to grim survival, channeling the original film's horror. What started as a bedtime story for children had now morphed into a decades-spanning saga. Number 9. The film was rated U, but scarred kids for life. When Watership Down hit UK cinemas in 1978, the ratings board slapped it with a U certificate meaning universal, suitable for all ages. Parents thought they were taking their kids to see a sweet bunny adventure. Instead, children were scarred by scenes of rabbits choking, bleeding, and being torn apart. The backlash was immediate and it never really stopped. Even now, decades later, the British Board of Film Classification receives complaints about that decision every single year. But author Richard Adams wanted it that way. He insisted the violence remain, believing children should see that nature isn't always gentle, that survival comes with blood and loss. Number 10. There was a massive cult following. When Watership Down hit theaters in 1978, audiences didn't know what to expect. It wasn't a Disney musical, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was just something different, stranger, and unlike any animated film before it. It also made history as the first animated feature released in Dolby Stereo, giving its battle cries and soundtrack a whole new power in theaters. Parents were horrified, but moviegoers kept coming. The film earned $3.7 million in the US and soared to number 6 at the UK box office in 1979. What started as a shock became a cult obsession. Over time, critics began to see it not as a traumatizing oddity, but as a bold, disturbing masterpiece that dared to treat animation seriously. Today, Watership Down stands as one of the most hauntingly unique animated films ever made. If these facts are already making your childhood memories feel a little darker, good. Because Watership Down isn't done yet. The weirdest, wildest truths are still coming. So if you're hooked, smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, or Hazel and Bigwig might just leave you behind. Number 11, it was a war story in disguise. On the surface, Watership Down looks like a story about rabbits running across fields. But one thing audiences were not quick to identify: the danger, the fear, the constant running. That all came from Richard Adams' real experiences in World War II. Adams fought in the British Army, and what he saw, the bombings, the displacement, the way ordinary people clung to each other to survive, bled straight into his rabbit tail. The Warrens aren't just burrows, they're refugee camps. The raids from predators and rival rabbits? That's invasion and occupation, rewritten with fur and whiskers. Suddenly, the movie's relentless tension makes sense. These weren't just cartoon rabbits. They were stand-ins for every frightened civilian trying to stay alive in a world on fire. Number 12, realistic rabbit behavior. For all its myth and allegory, Watership Down never lets you forget that its heroes are, in the end, rabbits. The animators studied real rabbit behavior obsessively, and it shows. Watch Hazel pause mid-run, ears swiveling like radar. See Fiver freeze in place, trembling when danger approaches. Rabbits dig burrows with frantic, clawing precision. They groom themselves, twitch their noses, and scatter in zigzag panic the way real rabbits do when predators strike. These tiny details might slip past you on first viewing, but they ground the film in a naturalistic reality that makes every threat feel sharper. Then, layered on top of that realism, you get this whole mythic world of visions and folklore. It's a strange mix, but it works. You buy into the fantasy because the behavior feels so true. Number 13, the secret Winnie the Pooh connection. You'd never guess it, but the nightmare world of Watership Down is secretly tied to Winnie the Pooh. The film's visual DNA was lifted straight from Ernest Shepard, the illustrator who gave us Christopher Robin and the 100-Acre Wood. Shepard's trademark style, soft pencil lines, rolling meadows, and a dreamy English countryside shaped the look of this movie. But here's where it gets whiskery. Those same cozy hills and hedgerows that once framed Pooh's honey hunts now serve as the killing fields for rabbits running from dogs, snares, and General Woundwort's army. The animators deliberately leaned into Shepard's warmth, then twisted it, forcing audiences to watch blood spill across landscapes that should have felt safe. It's like turning a bedtime story into a horror show, and it makes every death hit twice as hard. But the horror didn't stop at blood on the grass. The next fact takes it one step further, turning death into something you could see. Number 14, death turned into a vision. Few animated films dare to stare death in the face, but Watership Down doesn't flinch. The sequences with the Black Rabbit of Inlay, a shadowy skeletal figure who guides rabbits to the afterlife, are more than just story moments. They're visual translations of spiritual ideas about mortality. When Hazel finally meets the Black Rabbit at the end, the film slips into a quiet, dreamlike space. The countryside glows, the tension falls away, and death feels less like an ending and more like a release. For children who saw it, this was their first brush with the idea of an afterlife, cloaked in watercolor light and silence. Watership Down wasn't preaching any religion, but this particular scene seemed to be passing a message that even in a brutal world, death can carry dignity and peace. It's tender and unforgettable. Number 15. It was built like an emotional trap. A lot of people do not know this, but Watership Down was an emotional web. It manipulates your heart like a trap ready to snap shut. The filmmakers designed the structure to swing between gentle moments of camaraderie and sudden explosions of violence. One minute, the rabbits are grooming each other, sharing stories or basking in the sunlight. The next, a hawk swoops, a snare tightens, or claws tear into fur. This rhythm isn't random. It mirrors the reality of prey animals whose peace is always fragile, whose safety is always borrowed time. For viewers, it creates an emotional roller coaster. Just when you feel secure, the rug is ripped away. That contrast is what makes the shocking scenes land harder, not just because they're violent, but because they violate the comfort you were lulled into seconds before. Number 16. Friendship was the rabbit's secret weapon. One of the things Watership Down set out to show was friendship, but not in a cheesy Saturday morning cartoon way. When Hazel throws himself over Fiver during an attack, or when the rabbits huddle together after barely escaping danger, you feel the bond in every touch. These aren't just cute moments. It was how they stayed together. In a world where predators and traps are everywhere, leaning on each other is the only reason they make it through. Even Bigwig, the tough one, breaks down after the snare ordeal until Hazel and the others surround him. That closeness, that loyalty, becomes the real shield against everything trying to kill them. The shock is, for a film remembered for its violence, its most powerful message was that friendship keeps you alive. Friendship may have saved the rabbits on screen, but off-screen, the author of Watership Down nearly turned his back on the film entirely. Number 17. Richard Adams wasn't a fan at first. When the author of Watership Down saw the film for the first time, he wasn't exactly thrilled. Richard Adams thought the animation looked rough, and he hated how much the story felt trimmed down. To him, the rabbit's world had lost some of the depth and beauty he imagined when writing the book. He even said the film alters the book much too much. Pretty harsh, right? But here's how it turned out. Over time, Adams softened. The more he saw how audiences connected with the movie, the more he admitted it captured a surprising amount of his story's spirit. What started as disappointment eventually turned into reluctant respect. And honestly, that makes sense. The film may not be perfect, but it carries the same mix of hope, fear, and survival that made the novel unforgettable. Sometimes, even creators need a second look to see their own work's impact. Number 18. The entire movie was built on survival. In Watership Down, survival isn't background noise, it is the story. Every frame reminds you how close the rabbits are to disaster. When Bigwig gets caught in a snare, the choking, the kicking. It's brutal because it's real. Fiver's creepy visions, not just weird rabbit dreams, but survival alarms nobody else can hear. Even tiny moments, the way the group freezes at the shadow of a hawk, or how they bolt across an empty field, keep you on edge. This wasn't like other cartoons of the time where danger passed quickly and everything reset. Here, safety is fragile, and every calm moment feels like it could break any second. That's why the film still hits so hard. It makes you feel what it's like to live one breath away from danger. Number 19. The violence got it banned in some countries. For a film about fur, Watership Down ruffled a lot of feathers. While it became a cult classic in the UK and US, not everyone was ready for bloodied bunnies, snarling predators, and rabbits dying on screen. In parts of Scandinavia and even Canada, parents and schools pushed back hard, saying this wasn't a cartoon for kids. It was too grim, too gory, too despairing. Some broadcasters even refused to show it at all. But here's what they didn't realize quickly. That backlash only fueled its legend. Suddenly, Watership Down wasn't just an animated film. It was the cartoon too brutal to watch. Kids who weren't allowed to see it wanted to see it even more, and adults debated whether it was art or outright trauma. Ironically, the controversy didn't bury the film. It made it louder and more publicized. And finally, at number 20, after all the bans, blood, and backlash, we reach the moment that defined Watership Down. The part that wasn't terrifying because of gore, but because it dared to spiritualize death itself. Number 20. The Black Rabbit wasn't scary, it was spiritual. The Black Rabbit of Lay might look like a nightmare figure, but Richard Adams didn't invent it as a monster. He pulled it straight out of folklore and spirituality. In the rabbit's mythology, the Black Rabbit isn't a villain. It's a guide, a presence that comes when a rabbit's journey is over, leading them into the afterlife with quiet dignity. And the film actually honors that idea. When Hazel meets the Black Rabbit at the end, it isn't played as horror. There's no screaming, no violence, just acceptance. Hazel is invited to let go, and he does, peacefully. For kids watching in 1978, this was groundbreaking. A children's cartoon was telling them that death doesn't have to be terrifying, it can be calm, even beautiful. So, after 20 facts, one truth stands out. Watership Down isn't just a story about rabbits. It's about survival, faith, friendship, and the fragile thread that ties life to death. Every watercolor hillside, every blood-spattered struggle, every whispered myth, it all adds up to a film that burrows deeper than most family animations would ever dare. That's why, decades later, people still remember the Black Rabbit's shadow, Bigwig's defiance, and Hazel's final glance back at his Warren. It's a movie that unsettles and comforts at the same time. If these hidden details change the way you see the film, bounce towards that like button and subscribe for more deep digs into the stories that you thought you knew. And tell me in the comments, which moment from Watership Down stuck with you the longest? The vision of paradise or the nightmare that came with it?
Wow, that was weird.